My name is Iris, and at 34, I learned that my chair came with conditions. At my parents' 35th anniversary party, my dad pointed me toward the garage and said it was just for extended family. Visual: folded metal chairs, garage door half open, string lights in the backyard. I stood there in the driveway holding a glass of lemonade I'd mixed myself, 3 trays of appetizers I'd picked up that morning, and a gift bag containing the exact crystal decanter my mother had circled in a catalog 6 months earlier. The party was in full swing behind me. The Caldwells were there, the Whitfields. The entire real estate investment circle my father had been trying to break into for a decade. My sister Claire was at the head table. Of course she was. She'd been at the head table since we were kids, since she learned to say exactly what people wanted to hear, and I learned to clean up whatever got knocked over afterward. I handed the lemonade to my aunt. I set the appetizer trays on a folding table someone had dragged out for the overflow. I put the gift bag next to the garage door, where I knew my mother would find it later, because she always found the things I left for her, even when she pretended she hadn't noticed I'd brought them. Then I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled up the calendar app on my phone. The family calendar. The one I'd been maintaining for 7 years. The one that tracked my parents' doctor's appointments, Claire's children's school events, the annual cabin reservation, the property tax deadlines for the lake house, the HOA meetings my father always forgot until the fines started accumulating. Visual: phone, screen. Calendar grid. Purple dots on every single day. Nay. Even now. I didn't delete it. I just stopped being the person who updated it. The notification came through 3 hours later. My mother's voice, clipped and annoyed, asking why I hadn't reminded her about the cake delivery for the dessert table. I didn't answer. I was already at my apartment, pulling out the folder I kept in the back of my closet, the one with the cabin deed and the tax records and the email chain from 6 years ago, when my father had asked me to just handle the paperwork because he was too busy with the Caldwell deal. I sat on my floor with that folder open in front of me, and I started making a list. When I was 12, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and told me I was the easy one. Visual: kitchen table, checkered placemats, a bowl of fruit in the center. Those were her exact words. "You're the easy one, Iris. Claire needs more from us. You understand." I was 12. I was 12. I understood that Claire had gotten a new bike for her birthday, and I'd gotten a set of encyclopedias. I understood that Claire's parent-teacher conferences lasted an hour, while mine got canceled because my mother had a headache. I understood that when Claire got a B on her math test, my father spent the weekend helping her study. And when I got a B, my mother said, "Well, you're smart enough to figure it out on your own, aren't you?" But I didn't say any of that. I said, "I understand, Mom." Because that was what I did. I understood. I understood that Claire needed the attention more. I understood that my parents were tired. I understood that my job was to be easy, so that Claire's difficulty didn't overwhelm everyone. I understood that my father's real estate business was stressful, and my mother's social calendar was demanding, and I was supposed to make things simpler, not harder. The encyclopedias were fine. I read all of them. But I also started noticing other things. I noticed that when Claire left her backpack on the stairs, my mother picked it up and put it in her room. When I left mine, I got a lecture about responsibility. I noticed that Claire's allowance was $20 a week, and mine was $12. When I asked about the difference, my mother said, "You're more careful with money. It's a compliment." The second incident happened when I was 17. I'd saved up for 3 years, babysitting. Child, and you are evening only. Tutoring kids from the neighborhood. A summer job at the library that paid minimum wage, but let me read during my breaks. I'd put every dollar into a savings account my grandfather had opened for me when I was born. I only know $3,400. It was supposed to be my down payment on a car. Something used, something practical. I had it all planned out. Then Claire got into her first choice college. Not a prestigious school, not an Ivy, a small liberal arts college in Vermont that cost $38,000 a year. My parents had been saving for it, but there'd been a gap. Claire's tuition was due in 3 weeks, and they were short. My mother sat me down at the same kitchen table. The checkered placemats were gone by then. Daniel, new ones. Bagel, inanidiano, aobeyedeson. Tasteful. I vowed they call them Jews. She folded her hands in front of her and said, "Iris, you understand that we need to prioritize Claire's education right now. She has a full scholarship offer from state, but this school is a better fit for her. More opportunities. You want what's best for your sister, don't you?" I didn't want what was best for Claire. I wanted my car. I wanted the 3 years of work I'd put into saving that money. I wanted to drive myself to community college in the fall, because my parents had made it very clear they weren't paying for my education, not when Claire needed them so much. But I said, "I understand, Mom." She took my savings account information. Well, she transferred the full $3,400 to Claire's tuition fund. She said, "Your grandfather would have wanted it this way. Visual, bank statement, $3,400, transferred out." My grandfather died 3 months later. He left me nothing in his will because my mother had convinced him I was financially independent and didn't need the help. Claire got $10,000 for educational expenses. I got the set of encyclopedias back, which my mother had found in the basement, and thought I might want for sentimental reasons. I was 34 years old. I had been the easy one for 22 years, and I had just watched my father point me toward the garage like I was a piece of furniture that didn't quite match the decor. I'm telling you. 7 years ago, my father bought a cabin. Visual, cabin, pine trees, lake water, Jardwa. This was before the Caldwells, before the Whitfields, before he started trying to break into the top tier of Carolina's real estate. Back when he was still just a regional developer with a decent portfolio and a wife who knew how to network. The cabin was meant to be a retirement property, a place he and my mother could escape to on weekends, a legacy for the family. "No, he said all the right things at the closing. "No, this is for everyone. This is what we're building together." But he was busy. There were always deals, always meetings, always someone more important to impress. And then the cabin required maintenance, roof repairs, winterization, dock permits, property taxes that kept creeping up as the lake area developed. So, he asked me to handle it. Just the paperwork, Iris. You're good at that kind of thing, you always understand. I was 27. I had a bachelor's degree in accounting that my parents had dismissed as practical but not impressive. I had a job at a small firm downtown. I had a studio apartment with a Murphy bed and a kitchen counter that also served as my desk. And I had no idea that I was about to spend 7 years managing an asset that would never ever belong to me. I created a system, a spreadsheet that tracked every expense, every tax payment, every permit renewal. I automated the reminders. I set up separate accounts for the cabin's operating costs. I negotiated with the contractors, the dock repair company, the winterization specialists. I saved my father 23% on the property insurance by switching providers and comparing terms for 6 weeks. He never asked about the spreadsheet. He never asked about the insurance. He asked me twice a year if everything was handled, and I said yes, and he went back to his meetings. The first time I noticed something was wrong was 3 years in. Claire got married, a wedding that cost $47,000. My parents paid for every cent. Claire's husband was a junior associate at a law firm. Nice guy. Good family. Not a bit. And one. On all way. The kind of person who made sense for a Caldwell's-level social life. I brought my boyfriend, at the time, an accountant, from my firm. Friendly. Orderly. Polite. We gave Claire a set of copper pans from her registry. Oh. My mother pulled me aside during the reception and said, "Iris, I'm so glad you could make it. And thank you for handling the cabin. Oh, your father's been so stressed about that place. You really are so easy to work with. I know it, Debbie." She said it like a compliment. I said, "I understand, Mom." The second time I noticed, I was at the cabin myself. Winter. I'd driven up to check on the pipes after a freeze warning. My father had said he'd handle it, but then a deal fell through, and he was too upset to focus on minor stuff. Ooh, visual. Cabin interior. Frost on windows. Beds unmade. I walked through the property and realized what I was doing. I was managing a vacation home I was never invited to use. I was paying the taxes out of my own account and getting reimbursed months later when I remembered to submit the paperwork. I was the only person who knew how to winterize the plumbing, how to file the dock permits, how to handle the OOA that kept sending threatening letters about the landscaping. I was 31. Non-current. I was unmarried. I had a job I was good at but didn't love. I had friends who invited me to their wedding showers and baby showers and occasional weekend trips that I couldn't always afford because I was still paying my student loans, which my parents had also declined to help with because Claire had needed the money more. And I was sitting in the cabin's living room, looking at a family photo on the mantel. My parents, Claire. Claire's husband, Claire's 2 children, me in the back, slightly out of focus, because my mother had taken the photo with my phone and hadn't checked to make sure I was in the frame. I could have stopped then. I could have said something. I could have walked away. Instead, I went back to the spreadsheet. I updated the tax payment schedule. I filed the annual HOA report. I made another note that the roof would need repairs in the next 2 years. Because that was what I did. I was the one who handled things. I was the one who made sure nothing fell apart. I was the one who understood. Now, the mechanism came through the mail. A thick envelope. No. Legal letterhead. The kind of document that people throw away without reading because it's too boring and too dense. Visual. Legal envelope. Return address. Property and probate law wall. I was 33. I'd been managing the cabin for 6 years by then. 6 years of spreadsheets and permits and tax payments. 6 years of my father saying, "You always understand, Iris," and me nodding and filing another thing he'd never think about again. The envelope was addressed to him. Property records update. Down. Something about the county reassessment. I opened it out of habit because I opened all the cabin mail. Habit. Oh, not suspicion. And I saw the clause. Page 8.0. Sort by Croptoid. Paragraph 3. A property transfer addend that my father had signed 6 years ago, at the same closing, to simplify future ownership transitions. He'd been in a hurry. There'd been a deal he needed to get back to. The lawyer had said, "This just handles continuity if anything happens to you." My father had signed without reading. The clause said that any transfer of property ownership required a formal acknowledgement of all outstanding financial contributions to the property's maintenance and tax obligation. It was a standard probate protection, a way to ensure that heirs couldn't claim the property without accounting for what had been invested in it. I read that paragraph 11 times. I read it out loud to myself in my studio apartment, sitting on my Murphy bed with the legal envelope spread across my lap. I read the exact language. The part about quantifiable financial contributions. The part about documented maintenance and tax payments. The part about recoupment from estate funds prior to transfer. My father had signed it. Now I want him to. So had my mother, because North Carolina required spousal consent on property transfers. They'd signed it 6 years ago when the cabin was a new toy, and they were too busy with the Caldwells to pay attention to what they were putting their names on. I had records. Down 7 years of records. Spreadsheets and receipts and bank statements. Every tax payment. Every permit fee. Every contractor invoice. Every single dollar I'd ever spent or tracked for that property. I had them because I'd kept them, because that was what I did. I kept things organized. I made sure nothing fell through the cracks. I was the one who understood. I was 33, and I had just found the lever. There were 2 more incidents before I actually used it. The first was the Christmas of my 33rd year. Visual. Christmas tree. Presents wrapped in different paper. Fireplace. We were at my parents' house. All of us. Claire and her husband. Their 2 children. The children's other grandparents who were also there because my mother was trying to position for some kind of joint vacation property arrangement. The Caldwells had just bought a lake house nearby, and my mother wanted in. I was in the kitchen. making the dessert. Because Claire was entertaining the guests, and my mother was socializing, and someone had to make sure the pavlova got assembled correctly. My mother came in while I was piping the cream. She looked at me, then at the clock, then at the doorway where the other grandparents were chatting with my father. "Iris, can you speed this up? Everyone's ready to eat, and you know Claire's children need to get to bed soon." I said, "I'm going as fast as I can." She said, "You always understand when we need things to move along. That's why you're the easy one." I finished a pavlova. I served it. I watched Claire's children get messy with the berries, while their grandmothers cooed over how adorable they were. I watched my father hand out the Caldwell-approved gifts, the ones that signaled wealth and good taste. My gift to my parents that year was a new dock permit for the cabin. I'd handled the paperwork, paid the fee, filed it on time. I wrapped it in a small box and put it under the tree. My mother opened it and said, "Oh, how practical. Iris, you're always so practical." She put it aside and opened Claire's gift next, a cashmere throw. My mother wore it for the rest of the evening. Now, kind of the rest of the evening. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. Mouse. I didn't even leave early. I just took a picture of my mother in the cashmere throw, standing next to my father, the Caldwells in the background. I took the picture, and I tucked it into my folder with the cabin documents. The second incident came 3 months later. I was at the cabin. My father had sent me up alone to check on the spring thaw. He'd meant to come himself, but there'd been a networking event with the Whitfields. A golf tournament. All important. I walked through the property. I checked the gutters. I made sure the boat dock was secure. I filed the seasonal maintenance report that I'd been filing for 6 years. Visual, dock, lake, bare trees. And I overheard my mother on the phone. She was standing on the porch, her back to me, talking to Claire. She didn't know I was inside. "And really, Claire, I don't know what we'd do without her. She handles all this so we don't have to. Such a relief. It's honestly a blessing that she never married, you know. She's got so much time for us." I stood behind the screen door and listened to my mother explain to my sister that my unmarried, childless, practical existence was a convenient resource for the family. A labor pool. A problem solver. Someone who didn't need anything because she was the easy one. I didn't cry. I didn't open the door and confront her. I just pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd started keeping after the anniversary party. The folder with the cabin records. Oh, so soon. The folder with the clause. The folder with the plan I hadn't fully admitted to myself that I was making. I added a new line. Date. All. Time. Why? Exact wording my mother had used. And I went back to my spreadsheet. Then, the triggering happened alone. 2 weeks before my parents' anniversary, I called the lawyer, the one who drafted the property transfer. I found his name on the original document. I called him from my office during my lunch break, my door closed, my voice quiet and professional. Visual, office desk, closed laptop, legal documents spread out. "Mr. Hartley," I said, "I'm Iris Porter. I've been managing my parents' property at Lake Jordan for the past 7 years. I have some questions about Clause 8.3 of the transfer addendum. He was surprised I'd read it. He said so. Most people don't make it past page 3. I said, I'm the one who does the paperwork. He explained it to me. The exact process. The documentation I'd need to submit. The timeline for filing. The fact that if I filed, the property would be frozen until the accounting was complete. Any transfer would be invalid until the financial contributions were settled. He also told me that my contributions would be categorized as estate credits, that if I filed, I would be legally entitled to recoup 7 years of documented expenses before any property transfer could occur. That if my parents wanted to sell the cabin or transfer it to Claire, they'd have to clear my claims first. I asked if anyone else had ever filed a claim like this. He said, family disputes over property happen all the time. Usually, they don't have records. They have arguments. Yours sounds like you have records. I hung up the phone and sat in my office for a long time. I looked at the stack of papers on my desk. Tax receipts, contractor invoices, permit fees, 7 years of documentation, 7 years of invisible labor, 7 years of being the easy one. I filed the notice the next day. I'm married, and so I'm going to him. The anniversary party was at my parents' house, 4 weeks after I'd filed the claim. They didn't know. They couldn't know. The notice went to the county. Oh, it went to the lawyer. It didn't go to them unless they checked their legal mail, which they never did, because I handled all of that. I was invited. Hi. Of course I was invited. I was the one who'd helped plan the party, picked up the appetizers, made sure the rental chairs arrived on time. I was the one who'd confirmed the catering delivery, and the photographer, and the floral arrangements. Visual, backyard party, tablecloths, flower arrangements, guests mingling chanchoses. I walked into that party knowing what was coming. I walked in with the printed receipt in my purse. 14 pages. Summaries. The exact accounting of everything I'd done for 7 years. The garage incident happened first. Memo. My father pointing at the folding chairs. Named. That's for extended family, Iris. We need the good seats for the Caldwells. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked to the garage and I stood there for a moment, looking at the metal chairs that were apparently good enough for me. Then I went to find my mother. She was at the dessert table, arranging the cake. The cake I'd ordered, the cake I'd paid for, the cake that I'd coordinated with the bakery, because my mother was too busy with the Caldwells to handle it herself. Iris, she said, without looking up, can you check on the coffee? Your father's been stressed all week. He's been worried about the property. Something about a filing. You probably know more than he does. You always understand these things. She said it casually, like she'd said it 100 times before, like it was nothing. This was the third use of the line, the one right before the climax. The climax. The one where she was still confident, still in control, still sure that I was going to solve whatever problem had arisen. I said, I think I do understand, Mom. She looked at me then. Something in my tone. Something that didn't sound like easy, understandable Iris. Are you okay? She asked. You seem tense. You know you don't have to be stressed about the party. We can handle it. The irony of that sentence hit me so hard I almost laughed. Of course she could. How more she could. She'd been handling it for 34 years while I did everything else. Instead of laughing, I pulled the receipt out of my purse. 14 pages. Stapled. My name and the cabin's address at the top. 7 years of documentation. Visual. Stapled receipt. Column numbers. Ink underlining. I set it down on the dessert table next to the cake I'd paid for. "What's this?" my mother asked. 7 years, I said. Property taxes, maintenance costs, permit fees, dock repairs, contractor invoices, every dollar I spent or managed for the cabin. 7 years of tracking and filing and handling. Everything so you and Dad didn't have to. My father had heard something. He was walking over from the Caldwell's table. Namanning. Claire followed, her face curious, her husband behind her. The Whitfields were at the next table, pretending not to listen. "What's going on?" my father asked. I handed him the receipt. "You signed Clause 836 years ago, Dad. It says any property transfer requires a formal accounting of outstanding financial contributions. I filed the claim 3 weeks ago. The property is frozen. You can't sell it, can't transfer it, can't do anything with it until my contributions are documented and compensated." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You can't," he started. "I'll do," I said. "It's recorded. You'll get the official notice in the mail. Probably in a few days. The one you won't read because you always assume I've handled everything." Claire stepped forward. "This is insane. Iris, you're being dramatic. It's just property. We can figure this out. Don't make a scene in front of everyone." My mother found her voice. "After everything we've done for you. After we sacrificed Claire's." She stopped. I saw her do the math. I saw her remember the savings account. The $3,400. The encyclopedias. The chair in the garage. "You always understand, Iris," she said, the words coming out more desperate now. "You always understand how to work things out. We can fix this. We don't need to do this publicly." The fourth use of the line. Under 12 words. It had to be. I looked at her and said, "I do now." The Whitfield patriarch stood up from the Caldwell's table. I'd never met him before tonight. I'd seen pictures. He was the kind of man my father spent years trying to impress. Oh, over hair. A navy blazer with a monogrammed crest. He walked over to the dessert table and looked at the receipt in my father's hands. Then he looked at me. "Let me see that," he said. My father handed it over. He didn't have a choice. The Whitfields were watching. The Caldwells were watching. Everyone was watching. He flipped through it. 7 years of documentation. Spreadsheets organized by year. Totals at the bottom. $27,600. "Porter," he said, looking at my father, "this is an impressive record. I didn't know you had someone managing the property with this level of detail. My father's face went red. Hello. She helps out with paperwork. She's my daughter. The Whitfield man looked at me. Are you a property manager? No, I said. I'm an accountant. I've been handling the cabin for 7 years. My parents don't own it outright until the transfer. I see the clause, he said, pointing at page 8 on the receipt. This addendum was signed by your parents, both signatures. And these records. He looked at the totals again. Your daughter's been substantially maintaining your lake property for nearly a decade. This isn't just paperwork. This is management. My father was pale now. I didn't. This isn't. Did you intend to transfer the property to your other daughter? The Whitfield man asked. Because you can't now. Not without clearing this accounting. And frankly, given the detail here, I'm not sure any judge would side with you. This is 7 years of documented labor. Claire stepped forward again. This is insane. She's just trying to embarrass us. She's always been like this. Always trying to insert herself. The Whitfield man turned to her. Now, she's been maintaining an asset on your behalf for 7 years. And you didn't know. That's not inserting herself. That's doing your work for you. He handed the receipt back to my father. Porter, I'd recommend you get a lawyer. But I'd also recommend you think about what this says about your business practices. If you let an asset decline while relying on family labor without accounting, that speaks poorly to your judgment. He walked back to his table. The Caldwells were staring at my parents now. The Whitfields were murmuring. I saw my mother's face shift from anger to something else, something that looked almost like understanding. Sir, the first person to call was Claire. Visual, phone screen, Claire's name, 8 missed calls. She called that night. I didn't answer. She called the next morning. I still didn't answer. My mother called 5 times. My father left 2 voicemails, each more panicked than the last. But I was done answering. I was done being the one who picked up because someone needed something. I went to my studio apartment and I put the cabin documents back in the folder. I made a new spreadsheet for myself. A real one. One that tracked my own expenses, my own savings, my own future. The second week after the party, something interesting happened. Claire showed up at my office. She looked different, softer, like she'd been crying, but also like she'd been thinking. Visual, office lobby, Claire standing near the entrance, holding a paper bag. I brought coffee, she said. I don't know if you want to see me, but I brought coffee. I didn't invite her to my desk. I walked her to the small conference room near the lobby. We sat across from each other. The coffee was from the shop we used to go to when we were teenagers, before she'd gotten too busy with her social life, and I'd gotten too busy being the easy one. Mom and Dad are fighting, she said. About the property, about the money, about everything. They don't know what to do. They've never had to deal with something they couldn't just ask you to fix. I didn't say anything. I was supposed to get the cabin, she said. That was the plan. They told me after the wedding. They said it would be mine in the next few years. And now you'll have to account for what I put into it, I said. She nodded. Oh, I didn't know. About the taxes. About the maintenance. About the permits. I just knew it was there. I just knew you handled things. She paused. I didn't think about what that meant. This was the flicker. The one they'd told me to include in the ending. The tiny recognition that she'd taken something for granted and was just beginning to understand the cost. She didn't apologize. I wasn't expecting her to, but she brought coffee and she sat in the conference room and she said, I never knew how much you were doing. I never asked. I said, you never had to. She left after 10 minutes. I didn't promise anything. I didn't offer to help, but I drank the coffee, and I tucked the receipt for it into my pocket, and I went back to work. Yeah, I see. Now, so the cabin went into a dispute. That was the term the lawyer used. Property dispute. The county froze it. My parents couldn't sell it, couldn't transfer it, couldn't even rent it out until the accounting was resolved. I didn't have to fight. I just had to wait, because I had records, and they had arguments. And arguments don't hold up against documented spreadsheets. My father tried to call me to the house. I didn't go. He sent a letter through his lawyer. I forwarded it to mine. My mother called once more. It was 3 weeks after the party. She was quiet on the phone. Not angry. Not desperate. Just quiet. Iris, she said, I didn't realize you kept such detailed records. I didn't realize you'd been doing all of that for so long. 7 years, Mama. 7 years, she repeated. That's a long time. I didn't say anything. I waited. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry we didn't appreciate it. I'm sorry we didn't see it. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't an admission of everything. But it was something. A recognition that I'd been holding the weight they'd never acknowledged. You always said I was the easy one, I said. She was silent for a long time. I know, she said finally. I know we did. I'm sorry. I didn't forgive her. Not then. I might later. I might not, but I didn't hang up. I let her sit with the silence for a while before I said goodbye and ended the call. That was the last time I answered. Dama, I knew I'm killable. The property case settled after 6 months. Visual, court document, settlement language, dotted signature line. They had to pay me every dollar I documented. Might have gone to $27,600 due. They had to clear my claim before they could move the property to Claire. They did it because they had to, because the Whitfields were watching, because the Caldwells were watching, because my father couldn't afford the reputational damage of a messy legal fight. I used the money for a down payment, not on a cabin, not on anything my parents would recognize. A small house, half an hour from my office. Randall and Young's. a garden that needed work, a front porch with room for a rocking chair. Visual: house, front porch, garden, beds, a rocking chair. Yun. I moved in on a Saturday. Neg magponawa sa krayu emiyamid. Sorry did you. I sat on the porch and drank tea and watched the sun go down. My phone was in the kitchen, on silent. I didn't check it for hours. My mother called twice that day. Claire once said, "I'm tired, I'm doing." My father left a voicemail about the property transfer paperwork, as if he still thought I'd handle it for him. I didn't answer any of them. I finished my tea. I went inside. I sat on the floor of the living room because I hadn't bought furniture yet, and I looked at the empty space. My name is Iris. I'm 35 now. Oh. I have a house. I have records. I have a garden that needs work and a phone that doesn't ring the way it used to. And I finally know exactly how much I was worth to them. The number isn't the point. The point is the silence that followed. I still maintain a calendar. I still keep spreadsheets. I still notice when things need to be handled and I handle them. Well, the calendar belongs to me. The spreadsheets are mine. The things I handle are my own. And when I think about the easy one, I think about a woman who spent 7 years making sure her family could relax, and then one day decided she wanted to rest too. My name is Iris. I'm 35. And I've got a rocking chair on my porch and a phone that stays silent when I want it to.